why all of my friends
Yeah.
like lived in all these.
Seems like $100 was the going rate for these places back in the day.
If that.
A month,
Yeah, and I did not know them then.
Okay.
But Shelley also was involved with the beauty school.
Oh, okay.
So she did some time there.
The one on Heron?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the one on Wishkah.
Oh, Wishkot, okay.
Yeah, there was a beauty school there,
Okay.
sort of next to the adult store there.
Okay, oh,
Yeah.
further down towards the river then, that end of.
Yeah, there's like
Where the original Rosevers was, that section, that block.
yeah, but
there.
across the street.
Okay.
But behind Reiner's and the Book Carnival, and then there's a couple buildings, and then
Yeah.
Wittemackey's was eventually on the end,
Mhm.
and there's like a parking lot in between them. So there's
Okay.
like, I don't know what that building is now.
So this apartment that was not the best that they lived in, is that building here today still, or is
I
it-
don't know. We'd have to drive through town and look.
Yeah.
But the one, when we got back from Phoenix, I came home first, and then Chris and Shelley and Brian all came back together, and they moved into a little place not far from there that was owned by Swanson's, and then they weren't there for maybe a month or two, and then they moved over to Hoquiam and lived in a building which is no longer there, but there's that, what is that street that goes out like you're heading to Quinault? Is that Lincoln?
I believe so.
Yeah. So it's like right across the street from the road that goes up to the cemetery.
Was this the house that's described as having cracks in the walls that you could actually see daylight through? And
Well, it was up above, and there was a garage down below, and Chris had his van down there, and
Okay.
she had her bug down there,
Ah.
and we were working on it all the time,
Uh-huh.
and I would go over there and
This was pre or post Phoenix?
post Phoenix.
Post Phoenix.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because and then they came back a couple of, Shelley said like maybe 6 months later,
Mhm.
but I think it was more like 4, but I don't know.
So it wasn't long lived.
Well, I mean, they came back to Grays Harbor from Phoenix, because I thought I was coming back to go to school, and then ended up going to work in Ocean Shores for Binning's Quality Floors, and so and then they came back like a couple months later.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've already said that those pre-Nirvana bands, Pencat Tube, Bliss.
Now, I was around for all of those.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah, so those are Nirvana.
Yes.
The
earliest
the
ones.
Fecal Matter thing
Yes.
and the Stiff Woodies.
Yes.
No, that happened without me.
So there was supposedly again, I don't know if you would call it a one-off, but it was supposedly a performance up at a place called the Spot Tavern up there.
Yeah, Mo Clips.
You're right, and
Yeah.
so
Melvin's played there.
right, they would have been the opening act for
Yeah.
the Melvins.
Yep.
And so you
I
were
wasn't there.
Okay,
I heard about it, legendary.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you recall about that?
Well, I just know what they said about it, and then they basically said there was nobody there. And I mean, that's the way a lot of these shows were.
Sure.
Particularly if you weren't performing in Seattle or Tacoma. Now, and the thing that, I mean, I got all this secondhand through Buzz and through Chris and Dale and whoever was playing, but Matt Lucan's a huge friend of mine, and would always tell me about this basically 4 years before I got interested and aware of the thing. And there was this event that happened at Guerrilla Gardens, which shut down and created an ordinance within the Seattle municipality that you couldn't have any dance halls or under 21 clubs. And it's basically a snowball fight that occurred during a DOA show, as far as I know, and that closed that venue. And it was some city councilman's daughter, or somebody, you know, it was political.
Right.
The way it's described. And actually, Charles knows a lot about this and talks about it quite a bit. There's a lot of reading you can do on it out there. But this was all, you know, mythology to me. And this is before, you know, the internet. And so you would have these, well, what happened? Who, you know, why don't we do this? Well, it doesn't happen anymore. Well, because of what? Well, because of this Guerrilla Garden show where there was a snowball fight, the riot, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, as someone who's never there, it's like, wow, DOA, well, they must really be something. Now, they're from Vancouver, you know, they're 1,000 years old, they've been playing forever, they're still together now, you know. And so from a newbie's point of view, you're just enthralled with these stories, and you're trying to nitpick. It's not like you can run home, flip open Google, and go, oh wow, there's all.
Right.
Google it.
The stuff
you know?
of legends.
Yeah, and it was all oral history, every bit of it.
Yeah. So once you do get involved with what they're doing, even as their pre-Nirvana iterations, it seems like I'm always hearing about, people will say, yeah, I saw them play. Most recently, someone posted, I saw them at Zelasco Park. I don't know, there's really very little to verify where or
That's
when.
because it never happened.
Okay, so that was kind of my thoughts, was that I've never seen any information about that. Are there any performances, you know, that you know of that went off that are just not in the books? I mean, obviously there are going to be things like house parties and one-offs and things like that.
There were things that happened in Olympia like that. But here in Aberdeen, once I got involved with the band in late 1986, there are none that I'm aware of that I'm not involved in, that I don't know about. Okay. And this thing at the Poorhouse, I don't think, to the way it gets described as a Nirvana show, never happened.
Are you talking about the one in December of '88 after the Eagles Hall show? So yeah, the story goes, we'll just put this down.
That night, yeah.
That night,
yeah, never happened.
Kurt and Chris showed up and they did some Beatles covers. But
well, that might have happened, but Nirvana performing never happened. As a matter of fact, when they walked out of the Eagles Hall, they said they would never play in Grays Harbor ever again.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So they were
they never did.
And they were already living outside of Grays Harbor
Yes.
at that point. They were here in December of that year because they were preparing to go into the studio to record what would become Bleach.
Well, not only that, but they were supporting me and Attica, and they were.
Were you playing with the Cyclops?
Yeah, I was the guitar player for the Cyclones. Yeah.
Okay, great.
That was my band.
Yeah, fantastic. Who was in the Cyclops?
So that was myself, Ben Latin, Michael Newton, and Dayton Ackley.
Okay, and just for the record, what instruments were they on that night?
So Ryan Egner played guitar, Dayton Ackley played bass guitar, Michael Newton played drums, and Ben Latin was on vocals.
Okay. And let me think about this, because I have questions about that night. Probably the first one is really not even to do with the actual performance per se, but the band flyer that was created for that show. I don't know if you recall what it looks like. It had all three of the names of the bands performing in the order that they performed that show. For Attica, there was a handwritten note off to the side on the band flyer that noted something about somebody's birthday. It was a birthday celebration. I've never been able to figure out whose birthday that was. Do you have any idea?
I think I recall it as being Jim Lignow's birthday.
Jim Leightonell.
Lignow.
Late now with Attica.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And he's the guy who funded the whole thing. I mean, he had the PA, he set up the rental with the hall, however that went down,
Right.
and we just showed up.
Yeah.
Nirvana and the Cyclops just showed up.
Right.
And
Who,
yeah.
who do you know, always kind of fascinated with these band flyers, the artwork and whatnot. Do you know who drew that flyer?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
Okay, so we won't clear that up
No,
today.
you're not gonna clear that one.
Do you recall any of the details about that flyer? There was something very specific about that I have a question about.
Well, there was the bring a can of food
Yep.
to the food drive, fund drive, you know, and it'd get, you know.
Get in for $5 or something.
Well, and it was kind of one of those deals where, like, with the Eagles as a, whatever you call those kinds of clubs, you know, is they want to know, well, is there something that you're benevolently
Mhm.
doing, this activity? for?
Sure, it's a service club. They want you to
And
do
that's
something
all
else.
you have to do is you write, yeah, we're, you know, bring a can of food and we'll donate all that food to the local food bank.
How much canned food got donated that
I
night?
have no idea. Yeah.
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 And the question I have, and this is another.
That was the first performance for the Cyclones
Okay.
ever.
Yeah.
So that was, of the 3 shows we ever played, that was the first one.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Off in the bottom corner of that band flyer, there's a little note, and this completely sounds like something that I think maybe Kurt would have written, and it says, "Be there or get a haircut."
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Okay, yeah, I have a take on that.
Hmm.
I have a take on that, and I could be completely off base, but you know, obviously there's a saying, "Be there or be square" or whatever. And when I think of anything having to do with Nirvana getting a haircut, I think of Floyd the Barber, which I believe they played that night, right?
Yeah, they played that night, but you know, see, the other thing is Gary Kohler was sort of he was an artistic person too, and so he might have could have easily have, you know, been the culprit behind all those witty little comments. I mean, because he was closer with Dale, and now, you know, Aaron's playing with Attica in that time, and which was the whole reason why Nirvana got invited. You know, is he used to be Nirvana's drummer,
Sure. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and so anyway, so that's how those you know, chains of consciousness all developed. You know, it was all really informal and last minute, and not a lot of planning.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that there's, you know, a flyer was created in the first place was just amazing.
Oh, sure.
And I don't know if there was 3 weeks of notice before that.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
it was maybe 2.
Right.
And
And Nirvana at this time was probably at least a week or 2 into getting ready to go into the studio to record.
I don't recall. I feel like, you know, they were doing that bit with the demos, and we'd already played the show in Raymond, which that was my whole deal with Tony.
Their kind of their first show, right?
That is their first show,
Yeah, yeah.
first public performance.
As Nirvana.
As well, they weren't Nirvana then.
Okay, so
They
there was
weren't
nothing
Nirvana
saying-
until they played the Community World Theater, probably a year later with Dave.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
They were, you know, back then they called themselves Skid Row, and then we didn't even know it, but you know, somebody found out that Skid Row's a thing
Yeah.
then, and so well, that's not going to work, and so then he was off on coming up with some sort of the pen cap chew thing, and
Brown Cow or Brown
yeah,
Towel?
Bliss and you know, Throat Oyster and just all different kinds of.
Fred.
Yeah, Ted Ed Fred, that was they actually did a show as that one time, and that was at the Community World Theater.
Right.
But they were still playing the same songs
Yeah.
that they played at that Raymond show.
Yeah.
The same songs that they played at the Hoquiam Eagles show.
Right.
The same song, that's all that stuff that was eventually released as Nirvana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, going back to, since we're talking about the end of '88 here, and they play the show, Eagles Hall, probably the one and only show billed as Nirvana here, and they do have a deal to go in to record for the album that would become Delicious. It doesn't have a name yet. The story is that Chad is driving from his house on the island over, picks up Chris in Tacoma, drives down, picks up Kurt in Olympia, and then they drive over to Aberdeen to arrive here in the evening. Chris's mom's hair salon closes about
Maria's.
8,
Yep.
Maria's. And so they would get there about the time she's closing up shop,
Yep.
and then they would start rehearsing.
Yep.
It sounds like they were very dedicated to perfecting these songs to prepare to get into the studio, into Reciprocal. Were you there during those sessions?
Yeah, there's footage of me in with the lights out on
Okay.
that DVD.
Is this the footage